I thought keeping my affair a secret would save my marriage. Now, my husband wants a divorce, and I'm the one begging him to stay. My husband and I are both in our late 40s and have been married for more than 24 years. We have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. To protect our privacy, I won't go into too much detail about us, just enough to explain the situation. For the first 16 years, we had a wonderful marriage. It was during that time that a brief, poorly thought-out affair from my past with an old boyfriend was revealed to my husband by the ex-wife of that old boyfriend. Let me try to explain things as best I can. About 7 years into my marriage, I attended my 15-year high school reunion, and my husband joined me. I was part of the alumni committee and returned home 6 days before the event. My daughters accompanied me, and my husband flew in to join us the night before the main event. He and I attended the reunion, and we all stayed with my parents. However, when I was without my husband, I reconnected with my first serious boyfriend, whom I'll refer to as Reed. Reed and I had inappropriate contact multiple times that week. At the time, Reed was also married, with 2 children of his own. He claimed that his marriage was falling apart and that he was unhappy. In contrast, my marriage was loving and fulfilling. Reflecting back, I believe I did it to recapture some of the excitement from my youth. The years of being a mother and a homemaker in a secure marriage made me long for excitement and risk-taking. I despise myself for this. During those 3 days we spent together, we behaved as we did back in high school, but this time we were hiding our actions from our spouses, as well as our parents. We ended things 2 days before the reunion, realizing what a huge mistake we had made. We swore to have no further contact and to go on with our lives as if it hadn't happened. The reunion went well, and I even introduced my husband to my old boyfriend and his wife. We all chatted for a while, and with those 2 men standing side by side, I couldn't believe I had cheated on my husband, who was the love of my life and my support. I felt incredibly guilty and terrible. Right then and there I promised myself that I would never tell him because it would deeply hurt him, but I would make it up to him. For the next 9 years, our marriage was nearly as perfect as one could imagine. During that period, I felt a strong urge to do everything in my power to make him happy, and I did exactly that. I gave him my all and ensured there was some form of affection for me every day. I managed everything at home and took care of the children so that when he returned from work, he could relax and enjoy his time with the family. The guilt I carried was, and still is, incredibly profound. However, I also found immense joy in being a devoted wife and mother to our children. In this time we had 3 kids, as I gave birth to a boy 8 years ago. My husband was overjoyed to have a son, and they formed a close bond from the day he was born. To be fair, my husband is an affectionate father and shows the same level of love for our daughters. Everything was going well for us until one day my husband arrived home from work early and said we needed to talk. I was concerned and thought something had gone wrong at his job. Instead, he told me he had spoken to my old boyfriend's ex-wife earlier that day. As soon as he mentioned their names, my heart started racing. I had difficulty breathing and felt lightheaded. He proceeded to explain that she had told him her husband confessed to an affair he and I had years ago. She mentioned that her husband had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of Parkinson's disease 6 years ago and was now in an advanced stage. They had been divorced for 7 years, which I also didn't know, but she and her children still helped him with some tasks as his condition had worsened. Apparently, he was consumed by guilt, and he finally confessed. She's remarried now, but she continued to assist her kids with his groceries and some basic errands, as he didn't have anyone else. To her, the affair was no longer significant, but she felt a moral obligation to inform my husband, believing he should be aware. I agree with her, but I wish she had contacted me first so I could have confessed instead of catching my husband and me off guard. I begged my husband for forgiveness, explaining that it was a long time ago and had no real impact on our relationship. I reminded him of our wonderful marriage and assured him that he and our children remain my top priority. Naturally, he was upset, hurt, and felt deeply disrespected. He became extremely angry, which was something I had never witnessed before. For the next hour he used offensive language, including disrespectful terms, to address me. I sat there crying, not uttering a word as I believed every word he was saying. He had been nothing but a wonderful man to me and my entire family. Once he finished his outburst, he left in his truck without specifying his destination. An hour later, he called and told me he'd return in the evening. He instructed me to gather all the kids for a family meeting and to think about what I would tell them. I inquired about what he meant and pleaded with him not to make me do this, as we didn't want to burden our children. I expressed that I should be the only one suffering for this, but he insisted that they needed to know the truth about their mother. He told me not to say a word to them until he got home. In the evening I prepared dinner for the kids, but I couldn't eat much due to my nervousness. They asked where their dad was, and I informed them he'd return later as he was working. I then mentioned that he wanted to have a family meeting that night to discuss something. They inquired about why and at what time, and I told them to be ready at 8:30. I texted my husband to inform him that we were all set for 8:30 and also asked him to call me so we could go over what we were going to say. However, he didn't call. Instead, he arrived promptly at 8:30 and entered the kitchen where we were all seated. His demeanor was notably different. He was no longer angry. Instead, he was cheerful, giving each of our kids a kiss and a hug as usual. He sat down, looked at me, and asked if I wanted to start. I attempted to speak but couldn't. Tearfully, I said I couldn't do it. He then proceeded to explain to the kids, in simple terms, what I had done. My daughters began to cry and express anger, while my 8-year-old son looked bewildered and frightened. My daughters asked when this had all happened, and I told them it occurred years ago and I couldn't recall the exact year. My son, with a fearful expression and tears in his eyes, asked his dad if he was going to leave us. Hearing this, I began to sob, uncertain about what my husband would say. Thankfully, he assured our son that he wasn't leaving but mentioned that he would be sleeping in the spare twin bed in his room for a while. He asked our son if that was okay, and our son eagerly replied, "Sure, Dad." My husband explained to the kids that things were going to be challenging for a while, and he wanted them to understand that things between us might not be quite the same for some time, if ever. He assured them that things in their world would remain unchanged and advised them to bring up any discomfort to us so we could address it promptly. Our marriage was never the same after that day, and it took nearly 13 months before we began to regain some sense of being husband and wife. It wasn't full intimacy, but he gradually allowed some forms of physical contact. This continued for the next 3 months, but only when he was in the mood. He wouldn't initiate anything with me, but I would push things as far as he permitted daily. Eventually, we did start sharing love again, but he couldn't do it while looking at me, and the tenderness wasn't the same as before. He explained that when he saw my face, he imagined my old boyfriend, which immediately killed his excitement. I didn't quite understand this, but my therapist mentioned that it's not uncommon. She said that for some men, this is a way to regain their masculinity that was compromised by the affair. While it might seem selfish and one-sided on his part, for me, it's a turn-on for some unknown reason, and I eagerly anticipate these moments. Nonetheless, I wish we could return to the way things used to be. My husband was so giving before and always made sure I was satisfied. Now he doesn't seem to care about my feelings, and I think he just uses me as a way to release his desires. He's told me that he won't do things for me like I do for him, if you catch my drift. To him, I somehow feel permanently tainted in that aspect. It's bizarre, I know, but that's how things have been for the last 3 years. I've grown accustomed to it and accepted it as our new normal. All things considered, everything was going pretty well between us until this past January. It was during this time that something that should have been an enjoyable exercise turned into something that set us back months in our healing process. The wounds from the past affair were reopened, and we found ourselves even further behind than we had been. It was then that my son came home and told his dad and me during dinner about a project his 8th grade history class was working on. The project involved mapping our family history in America as far back as possible. The teacher suggested that students could use reports from genetic testing companies, but it wasn't mandatory. He said his friends were planning to use them, and he wanted to do the same. Second question, I reconnected with him when I returned home, and that's how we got in touch. Each of us on the reunion committee had a list of names to call and confirm attendance, and I purposely chose the list with his name on it. You could say I initiated contact. At the time, I wanted what happened to happen, and after it did, I felt terrible guilt, which has made me a better person. Third question, my husband has never pressured me into anything. I've willingly done everything with him, and most of the time, I've taken the initiative. While I do wish he'd hold me and show me affection as he did before, I've accepted our new life and appreciate any attention he gives me. When he's happy, I'm happy. Fourth question, my husband has never cheated on me. I'm certain of this because his focus has always been 100% on his family. He is a good man, an excellent father, and the best husband. Although our relationship has changed, I'm sure most women here would envy what I have and gladly trade places with me. Update: 7 months after the original post. Hello everyone. I'm here to give you a quick update on the current status of my relationship with my husband. Sadly, my husband has decided that he wants a divorce. As I type this out, it fills me with sadness, sorrow, and regret. These have been my overwhelming feelings since he told me about his decision a month and a half ago. I did everything I could to try to change his mind, but he had already made up his decision. He explained that the past 5 years had been miserable for him, and he assumed they must have been tough for me as well. I told him I wasn't miserable, and that simply being around him brought me joy. I begged him to reconsider, but it was clear that he had made up his mind. He expressed his desire to start a new life for himself, hoping I would do the same. He thanked me for the years before my unfaithfulness, and for the effort I put into trying to salvage our marriage. Nevertheless, he said the affair, along with my dishonesty and lack of transparency, had damaged his ability to trust me completely. Beyond the affair, he acknowledged that I had been a great mother, and he wanted us to remain close and be good parents after the divorce for the sake of our kids. We're working out the details outside of the courtroom, so the legal proceedings will be more of a formality. We have such a good relationship that his lawyer even questioned once whether we were sure about getting a divorce. I expressed my reluctance, but I respect my husband's decision. Everything should be finalized within the next year. One of the most challenging tasks will be selling the family home we built together, the place where we conceived and raised our children. While we'll both make a substantial amount from the sale, property prices in the area have increased so much that I wouldn't be able to afford a new one on my own. I'm currently searching for an apartment for my new place. My husband has similar plans but intends to buy a new place, possibly closer to his workplace. Our kids are handling it well, and my son has been incredibly supportive. He's truly a guardian angel. Having my son around has helped me through some really tough times. My daughters have been supportive too, but they're both busy with school and don't visit home that often. I'm planning to start job hunting later this year, but for now, I'm taking a couple of months off to focus on self-improvement. Over the past 5 years, the stress in my life has taken a toll on me, leading to some weight gain. My doctor has warned me about high blood pressure and my weight. I don't turn to alcohol, so I use food as a way to cope when I'm under stress. Unlike my husband, I don't exercise or eat healthily, which has caused me to gain quite a bit of weight, especially recently. My goal is to return to the weight I was when we first got married. In conclusion, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for the thoughtful responses and their concern for my well-being. I never thought my life was that interesting, but apparently it is. Please don't feel sorry for me. I'll be fine. The darkest days are behind me, and I'm moving towards a brighter future. Who knows? My husband might change his mind or return to me in the future. Or stay grateful.